Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Handsome German, the only show on the internet, one that you should support by subscribing should you at any point during this video have considered it entertaining, informative, or good to fall asleep to. Now, this is my new Game of the Year 2021. It was an end release before then, but Psychonauts 2 is absolutely positively everything you could have ever hoped a sequel to Psychonauts could have possibly been. It retains all of the same visual style and flair, all the same musical flair. It obviously is also written by Tim Schafer, so it retains all of the comedy, all of the really well-handled darker themes of the original, and just explores a few more than that game did. And it's as if nothing had happened over the last however many years it's been since the first game.
How long is that golden door been?
I would not be surprised to learn that the entire story for this game had already been planned out, if not already been scripted in its entirety during the development of the first game, just because of how amazingly well all of the existing themes tie into the second game, how completely on point every single character is. Everyone, all of the returning characters, and save for the other kids at camp, you know, Sasha, Mia, Coach, all of those are back. Fort Crawler is back. Everyone is here again, and they're exactly how you remember them. Now, I say exactly how you remember them instead of exactly the way they were, because I didn't actually have time to replay the first game before playing this one, and it's been a couple of years. But yeah, no, everyone behaves exactly the way you would expect them to. Everyone has still the same nice, lovable quirks about them. And something that is a genuinely funny running gag going on with this game is that in-universe, the end of the first title was only 3 days ago. And I'm not going to spoil any of the jokes that do happen over the course of the story, but there's such a nice little nod to those of us who played the game when it came out, or who played it on Steam a couple of years after that. And that's just incredibly charming. They really nailed the balance between fan service and doing something new with the different characters. Like, in the original, if you remember Fort Crawler, the old guy who seems to just be kind of the janitor for the summer camp, there is a lot more to him than you expected. And it was really fun to explore more of that. There's so much love and attention to detail, too, in the way the worlds are designed. In that, here, for example, you're in the mind of Lobato, who you might remember from the first game. I know I forgot about him until they showed him on screen, and then I was like, oh yeah, him, yes. And he was involved in the kidnapping of one of the major agents of the Psychonauts organization, which you would have had to play the VR-only Rhombus of Ruin to get that story, which unfortunately I didn't. But, you know, the game explains what happened in Psychonauts 1 and Psychonauts 1.5, Psychonauts VR, whatever you want to consider it. And this is an interrogation. And, since you're a psychonaut, the way you interrogate people to get information out of them, you go into their mind and have a look around. But there's something that stops Lobato, who's a gentleman on the big velvet painting over there, from disclosing the information that you're looking for. And at first, you don't quite know why. It just seems like he doesn't want to cooperate. But then you enter the poster gallery, as this section is called. And yeah, you can see only pigs squeal, loose lips sink drips, stitches get snitches. Those posters are everywhere. She's watching. So it becomes very apparent very quickly that someone or something really drilled into his head what will happen to him should he disclose anything to the Psychonauts. And that is just one of the many, many worlds, mind worlds, if you will, that you explore over the course of the story. You explore plenty of them. I lost count of how many drastically different brains you actually enter. And every single one of them is like this. Every single one of them has this incredible art style, this absurd attention to detail for placing all kinds of hints as to who the character is, what their mental struggles are, as well as mashing that together with other parts of their personality or personal history. So in this case, you're interrogating an unlicensed dentist / brain surgeon, which is literally how he's described. And as you can see, everything is full of weird, disgusting teeth and gums. And that is played into further by having it be combined with a mental construct that Sasha 9, one of the other agents, one of the teachers from the first game, has created to try and fool Lobato into having him think that he's actually in a perfectly normal office, and telling you what you need to know is just part of his job. But as you can see here, the actual existing mind of Lobato completely overgrew the mental construct that was created for him to try and trick him. And this kind of thing you'll find in every single world of the game. And a lot of the time, these are more than just literal manifestations of a character's past, of a character's thoughts and feelings. A lot of them are actually surprisingly strong metaphors that, if you think about for a second, are going to make you appreciate what they've done with the world design just so much more than you already can just from how creative and quirky and strange the visuals are overall. For example, there is a character who has isolated themselves and who has also become forgetful. And their world consists entirely of ocean and a few islands. And the character, you'll meet their mental projection inside the world, as you do with all of them, doesn't want to know where his past went. He deliberately forgot about it. And the fact that he isolated himself both physically and emotionally is reflected in the world by showing them on an island all by themselves and asking you not to go explore, asking you to just stay there, which has this really powerful metaphor in it for, yes, they think they want to be alone, they think they want to forget, but in reality they still long to have some other person nearby. Oh, and this is me quitting out of the game and entering it again because there was unfortunately a bug that caused an enemy to spawn, I believe, under the floor, and I couldn't find it, so I had to just go back to the last checkpoint, which is a bit of a bummer. There are a few bugs here and there. But that is just one of the examples where the level design, the visual design, and the writing all come together to create these incredibly powerful representations of mental illnesses, of unhealthy thought patterns, of different kinds of self-destructive thinking. And that is just the biggest strength that the first game had, and it is also the biggest strength that this game has. And if you add to that the, like I mentioned before, the absolutely fantastic writing, which did genuinely make me laugh out loud several times, especially when it's combined with the perfect comedic timing that you'll see during cutscenes, and you'll have a game that'll make you laugh, it'll punch you in the gut, it'll make you cry a happy tear or two. Whenever people talk about, oh, it's an emotional game, and what they mean is the dog dies, then I'm like, okay, well, I guess sadness is an emotion, but bumming people out is so much easier than creating this genuine feeling of making a difference in a world that is so incredibly bizarre, yet entirely inhabited by human beings that you can relate to, that have problems that you or someone in your life also experiences. And it just combines all of that serious subject matter, addiction, substance abuse, bereavement. It covers so many different things, and it just never lets up, ever at all. It just keeps going strong, and it ties up loose ends from the first game. It reveals that there were a couple of aspects of the first game that you didn't even know were mysteries. It ties back into the very first level of the original Psychonauts, which then becomes a huge plot point for the entirety of the game. And it doesn't even point at it. It doesn't even tell you, haha, see what we did there? It's just, yeah, no, you get it. The storytelling is just incredibly strong, and the world design is fantastic, absolutely immaculate. There are a few things that could have probably been done a little better, but there's definitely nothing that is, in terms of world design and storytelling, there's nothing that is flawed at all. Just things that could have been even better. And that's fine. There were probably some reasons why they didn't attempt certain things. There is a world that is entirely built around the five senses. And the vision portion of it is very visually busy and interesting and plays with rainbows and lights and all that sort of thing. But then the auditory and tactile worlds, they are just the same, just in a different color. And I can definitely see why they did it that way, because it would be really easy to create a world where you have to use your ears to navigate the world, but that would obviously have the negative effect of, what if somebody can't hear? Or, even if you're willing to put that in regardless and then have subtitles that tell you, oh, music getting louder in this direction, then it would no longer be about hearing things, then it would just be about reading the subtitle. And, it's difficult to do. I think they had to just come to the conclusion that, on average, the most common sense that most people playing video games have is sight. So I can see why they didn't go overboard with it. And obviously there's also the problem that you can't really represent taste in any real way in a game like this. They could have put something there, but they already had a cooking minigame, so I don't know. So, while that world, in terms of writing and presentation, is every bit as fantastic, if not more fantastic than most of the game, it is kind of weird to be in the spot where I'm mildly disappointed by the fact that they weren't able to go fully crazy. And I'm sure that if ever anyone manages to develop full haptic feedback, full smell sensor video game controls, ignore me falling into the pit several times, I'm not very good at this game. I know that Double Fine will probably be among the first to take full advantage of such bizarre features that nobody has asked for and probably should never be developed because they'd be creepy. So, yeah, that's just a kind of little thing where, like I said, some things could have been even better, but they are fantastic the way they are. Absolutely. Another thing that the game sometimes struggles with is determining when to allow the player to take control of the character and when not to. There are several moments in the game that would have made for really awesome gameplay sections, which, some of them would have required entirely separate programming models and whatnot, and state machines and all that terminology that I'm vaguely familiar with. So, I get it. Don't waste your money on a 10-second gameplay thing that'll never come back. Focus on the core gameplay and just show something in a cutscene instead. But that also applies to certain chase sequences that happen at some point where you end up not controlling anything at all, which feels a little weird. I was just watching this cutscene of Raz running away from something, and I was just holding the controller, getting ready to just run, getting ready to take control and get out of there. But then the cutscene ended with him just being out of danger, and okay. Ended just with him being completely safe, and that whole sequence is over. And that felt a little strange. I feel like just having a moving kill plane follow Raz around wouldn't have been too difficult to do. But, I don't know how exactly their engine works, so it's Unreal Engine 4. I have no idea how to do anything in there. Maybe it's more difficult than I think it is. So this is me trying to figure out what these swirlies are. You'll find out later in this video what they're for. I just, experimented with it and thought since I just got the Levitate ability, I'd be able to get pushed forward by them, have my balloon pushed forward by them. But, as it stands, I'm just going to throw myself into the abyss several times. Oh well. Now, something that you may have already noticed is that this is the first level, and you're already getting a lot, if not all, of your original game powers back. I know clairvoyance you get a little bit later, but you have telekinesis to throw around physics objects, Psyblast for ranged attacks.
I'll take them into the room.
Yeah, you should probably do that before YouTube demonetizes me for having minors in my video. You have the Levitate ability, which is, as always, still incredibly fun to use. I pretty much for the whole game just had it on LT because it's just such a good, versatile skill. As you can see, you can use it to create a small balloon to float gently, which helps you break falls. Oh gosh. Sorry about that. Now I don't know where I was. But, oh yeah, Levitate. And the other use for Levitate is to, double jump. I forgot that that's also a Levitate ability. And also create a ball under your feet, after which you can, gain momentum by rolling around, and you can jump really, really far. And what is just super satisfying about Levitate is that it does not stop your momentum at all. You can run, you can land on a platform, hit LT, or whichever button you want, to create a bubble, to pick up some speed, and make a much further jump, which is super useful when you don't want to wait for a moving platform to position itself exactly where you need it. You can instead just take, a tiny shortcut and skip some of that wait time, which I always love, always incredibly satisfying to do, and it's great. One of the bigger flaws with the game, something that I actually do think hurts the game quite a bit, is the fact that solutions to puzzles are spelled out to you very literally and very directly after a very short time. And I definitely think that that's something that the developers should change, should find a different solution for, because let's just make up a random example that doesn't exist. Imagine if you were in the mind of a baby and they are frustrated because they can't figure out which block to put through which hole, and then as you walk around, by the time you get there, your character is probably already going to have said that, hey, what if I put the square peg in the square hole? And it's like, yeah, I know, I was just figuring that out. Why are you telling me that while I'm still working on it? Well, I'm still working on just getting there, which a lot of the time the puzzles are pretty easy, and it doesn't really make a difference whether Raz tells you what to do or not, because you would have figured them out pretty quickly anyway. But other times the puzzles are actually really clever. Not difficult, but very clever, and you feel good for figuring them out until he just tells you the solution while you're in the middle of doing it, which becomes especially annoying when you are exploring before solving the puzzle. For example, there's a puzzle later in the game where I was convinced that as soon as I solve it, I'll be kicked out of that mental realm. So I was like, okay, I can come back later to get the remaining collectibles, but I can also just get them now before I leave, before I wrap this up. And while I was exploring a different part of the map, Raz would keep telling me the solution to the puzzle, and that was just really annoying. I think that there should be a proximity trigger to the puzzle, where if the player spends 5 minutes futzing around the puzzle area and doesn't solve it, then he can start giving you some hints. But the fact that you can that you can figure out a puzzle and then go explore before you actually complete it, or you don't want to worry about the puzzle yet, so you just go around and explore for other collectibles, it's just really frustrating. I really wish they would change that, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. But, you know, it's probably the biggest flaw this game has. Another thing that's half a flaw and half not exactly is, well, it is a flaw, but it's not a big deal. You can pretty much ignore it. Is the economy, where, yes, you can buy so-called pins. You can have up to 3 of them, and they give you random, well, not random, well, various different effects depending on what they are. The tutorial one changes the color of your levitation bubble, which obviously is completely useless, it's just cosmetic, but it's also just to introduce the concept of pins to you. Now, the currency in this game is Psychonauts, which is usually found by smashing random objects, by completing quests, by finding supply chests hidden around the world.
Is he all right?
Well, only hidden around the real world, not the not the mental one.
This is our
And it created this weird situation where I bought a couple of pins that I thought were really interesting.
and they're trying
But they ended up not really doing anything. There was one that made it so that your telekinesis will pet animals instead of picking them up. And I was like, surely there will be a part in the game where I can complete a small optional objective by equipping that pin and petting a goat or something.
We can lie down.
If there is, I couldn't find it.
see what I can find.
There's other pins that seem just completely useless to me, and I don't even know if that's intentional or not.
Does
I
anyone else
There's a pin that it allows you to ground pound while you have your levitation bubble out, but you can also just not have your levitation bubble out. You can also just
I've been
jump without the bubble and then ground pound, and it's probably the same effect. I don't know, I didn't buy that pin because it sounded useless.
all the merit badges he wants.
There are pins that are potentially really powerful that you can only buy once you're about halfway or a little more than that through the game.
Psychonauts?
Like one that
Those 146.
decreases the cost of items in the store, one that doubles the amount of Psychonauts that you get. And obviously, since this is a video game and since I'm me, I'm never going to spend
Intern.
any money, any Psychonauts,
I hear the floor.
on anything other than things that give me even more Psychonauts so that I can buy everything really quickly later on. Problem is that by the end of the game, the things that I spent money on were... okay, let's... the things that I actually spent money on were larger wallets, which would allow me to carry more Psychonauts, and an item that saves me Psychonauts when buying stuff in the store, and an item to collect double Psychonauts. So all I did this game was spend money to get more money, hoping that one day I will find something that is totally worthwhile, and I'm gonna buy it, and I'm gonna feel really smart for having saved up all that money. But that's not what happened at all. I just ended up only spending money on money upgrades because everything else seemed pretty useless. You can buy core challenge marker cores, which combine with side challenge cards, which is a different collectible. And if you collect 9 of those cards and you buy a side core, you get a rank up. And from what I can tell, you can reach up to rank 102 in this game, which pretty crazy. I was about 78 at the end of my playthrough.
What if I let them go and the worst happens?
And
Need to focus.
yeah, you can buy those, which are, useful permanent upgrades, and they're really cheap. They're only 25 Titanium out of the fucking 10,000 you can carry at the end of the game, or 5,000, I don't even remember.
So many more missions.
5,000, I think.
I mean,
And you can also buy healing items, which are also incredibly cheap, and are clearly there to make the game more accessible for players who struggle with the combat. And the combat can be quite tricky, so I totally understand why they were included. But other than that, other than those, upgrades, which require other collectibles to even use,
I feel like I'm fine.
and healing items, you can only buy pins, and like I said, most of the pins feel completely worthless. Especially considering that you can only equip 3 at a time. It seems bizarre to me that they would even include the pins at all if they're not going to do much with them. Because like I said, even the ones that are interesting, there's one that literally reverses the effect of one of your powers. And I thought, oh, well, that could be incredibly useful. There's just my mouse cursor in the top left corner. It's in the recording, not in the watch through. Sorry about that.
But what use is it?
But none of them make a difference in any real way. And honestly, I think they should have either allowed you to equip way more pins, or they should have just dropped them and done something different with it instead.
Get some more funding soon.
I don't know. It's weird. I don't think that Double Fine is very good at doing upgrade systems. I recently played through Headlander, where a lot of the powers were very useful, a lot of the optional upgrades, but to the point where after, 20% of the game, my character was so overpowered that the rest of the game was a complete cakewalk, and that's just silly. That is just really, really silly. But yeah, economy is a bit of a problem with the game, and the pin system is a bit of a problem. The rank up system is perfectly fine. You rank up, obviously, by completing different challenges, by collecting certain collectibles. And this will ultimately, give you more skill points to spend. And those upgrades can be really powerful. They're all for specific psi powers, which, you can focus on the ones that you like. However, there are at least 2 that you should absolutely get because they open up new parts of the level for you. And I guess that's kind of a potential trap for new players, where you could spend all of your points on Psyblast upgrades, but those aren't actually going to help you find the final 2 collectibles of any given level. So, keep that in mind when you play. Those, there are some upgrades that are more useful than others, which is pretty common.
So well on your
There are some places in the game where I actually experienced a very pleasant surprise of certain abilities suddenly becoming useful, certain upgrades suddenly becoming useful, and then upgrading them late in the game and, finally understanding why it exists. clairvoyance, I thought, why would you ever need to create a shield when you use clairvoyance if you're never going to use it in combat? But, you know, later in the game you actually might have to use it in combat.
It's crucial to find
And, you know, that kind of makes up for it.
with you handling that.
The actual combat in the game is kind of a mixed bag. It lacks a lot of feedback, I feel. It's really difficult to tell if an enemy is going to actually be staggered by one of your attacks. Considering how strong your melee attack looks, it's surprising that it doesn't knock enemies over at all with the first couple of slaps. So that's a little weird. The game is very much insistent that you use your dodge roll when fighting.
Weak.
Enemies often have an area of effect with their attacks that makes it almost impossible to walk out of the way of the attack, even when you see it coming. So you might want to either use Levitate to move more quickly, or you might want to just lock on and do some dodge rolls to get out of the way of those attacks.
Oh, yes.
There's a pretty great variety of enemies that are all very nicely themed and appropriate for the worlds that they appear in. You probably, if you've played the first game, already know the censors, which are these little dudes in glasses and suits that only ever say no. And they're really charming, they're really doofy. There's a bigger version of them now who does a lot of weird wrestling moves by the looks of it. I'm not really familiar with wrestling, but that's what I picture wrestlers acting like. They have nice little brass knuckles that say no on them with two crossed out stamps. So that's pretty entertaining. You saw doubts, which are these slimy monsters that slow you down, which is, you know, what doubt does to you. So that's kind of a nice little connection there. There's, later on in the game, I'm not going to tell you what they look like or how they act, but as a final example, there's panic attacks who move incredibly quickly, and the only way to defeat them is to take a step back, take a deep breath, and tackle them at your own pace. And all enemies are kind of like that, except for the sensors, where the way they act and the way you defeat them is based loosely on the kind of mental issue that they represent. If they're a bad idea, if they're a panic attack, they work really well with the way they're implemented. Some of them have regional differences and will actually look different in different people's minds, which was fairly amusing for one enemy type in particular that I'm not going to spoil. And yeah, overall, hey, I'm gonna put your name on screen because I forgot to look it up. But you know, the guy who in that one documentary talked about how he designed the combat for Psychonauts 1 and nobody ever really talked about it or appreciated it. I just wanted to let you know, even though I forgot to look up your name, I appreciate what you're doing. The combat is super solid. I found it very enjoyable. I like how much variety there is in how you can tackle enemies. You can go for a melee build. You can focus on ranged attacks. You can focus on burning enemies. You can combine several powers at once. You can pick up items with telekinesis and throw them at enemies while also running around on your levitation bubble to avoid damage. You can dodge past enemies and use really powerful melee attacks to take them out. Combat is definitely super solid, but you're probably not going to see a lot of people talk about it because it's everything else about the game that makes it so special. It's the writing, it's the presentation, it's the music, it's the sheer creativity in all of the different worlds. And right now what you're seeing actually takes place in the quote-unquote real world. And even that place looks cartoony and over the top. And it really makes sense then to see the way the characters in the world perceive themselves and the world they're in, because the mental worlds are only slightly crazier than the real world. So that's something that I like thinking about every now and again and just appreciate. The, like I said, writing is absolutely fantastic. It's begun, has it? I love Sam. There is more than one moment where Sam made me laugh really, really hard. Both in terms of the writing, in terms of her performance, and in terms of her powers and how she uses them. It's great.
Did Agent Forsyth say where she was going?
If you are looking for a game that's particularly woke, if you will, this might also be a quite a good fit for you, considering that, you're playing as a refugee, or at least the son of a refugee, and you saw earlier there's a character who doesn't have the use of his legs, and characters of different ethnicities, there's characters of different sexualities even in this game. So that's cool. That's if that's something that you appreciate when a game does, then you'll definitely find something to love in here. I don't know how I figured this part out. I just kind of decided to jump at the wall and got lucky. I have no idea how you're actually supposed to do it.
Hollis, wait!
So, yeah, the creativity on display is absolutely fantastic. I love that they maintained the same visual style. The game didn't go overboard with modern features, but it still very clearly could not have happened on the original Xbox, so, that's good stuff.
Ladies and gentlemen,
And,
Don't worry, Agent.
yeah, I think the best way to sum up the entire game is a video that I accidentally briefly showed before. There we go. So this is me using the clairvoyance power, which allows you to see through the eyes of other people. And what is so incredibly fantastic about that power is that every character sees Raz as something that he isn't exactly. So here you can see Agent Forsyth, who is the currently in charge of the Psychonauts, seeing Raz as a hatchling with goggles, and that's what she considers him. She thinks he's, an adorable little child who is way too young to accomplish anything. And other characters see very different things. If you get in the head of a deer, you see Raz as just this crazed-looking, screaming maniac who's running around making way too much noise. If you get into the mind of Lily, who some of you might remember from the first game, hopefully, who is, the primary love interest in the series, you actually see Raz as this very dapper, very put-together super spy, which is just kind of an interesting bit of characterization where, yes, she teases him a lot, she messes with him a lot, but she can't quite hide the fact that she is crushing on him really hard, and that she actually does consider him very capable. And the fact that they went through the trouble of creating these different sprites for so many different characters is incredible. There's a rat named Harold, which I don't remember if he was in the first game or if he was from Rhombus of Ruin, who, when you go into his eyes, just sees Raz as a person in a rat costume, just waving at him friendly, which is just, oh, he actually likes Raz. And that is such a detail that did not have to be there at all. And that's something that they did in the first game too, which was incredibly powerful in the Milkman level, of course. It's such a detail that did not have to be there, but they did it. They did it, and that's great. I love that they combine this aspect of writing, gameplay mechanics, and visual design to tell you just a tiny bit more about different characters and how they see the world. Obviously, every now and again, when you see through somebody else's eyes, you are going to see. Let's just put some gameplay on again. You're going to see, for example, hearts floating around a different person in the room, and you're like, oh, well, there's a little story there. She's crushing on this person. That's cute. So, let's see if that goes anywhere. Oh, this person is really obsessed with bacon. Okay, that explains why they view the world like this. And the game just never ceases to amaze in the love and attention for detail and passion that went into it. And the thing is that the game isn't perfectly polished in every way, not at all. There are invisible walls in weird places, there are surfaces that are, appearing to be perfectly walkable, but when you jump on them, you slide down and you fall into the water, which, kills you because of the curse that you should be aware of if you played the first game. And there are parts where I found a roundabout way of sequence breaking, only for the game to just decide to kill me anyway, because I didn't do it exactly the way they wanted me to. Which, fair enough, but also kind of a shame. There are a lot of little moments like that. During conversations, it's pretty clear that every single dialogue option is its own little cutscene that exists in a separate universe. For example, there's a conversation during which one of the dialogue options ends with you having a pine cone thrown at your head, which then lands in the background. And then once you pick a different dialogue option, it just disappears. It just pops out of existence instantly, which is a little jarring to say the least. But it would have been more work to fix such a minor issue that really doesn't impact the game at all.
But it's too late to turn back now.
And that's why I think it's important to normalize, and I've been thinking of a good word for it. There's Eurojank, because, in Europe there's laws that prevent the horrible exploitation of, of workers, at least to some extent. There's Eurojank, because there's only so many hours in a day, and people have to actually get paid, and have to get health insurance and all of that sort of thing, which just makes games more expensive to make, which leads to some parts of the game not being as polished, because there's only so many man-hours in a day, if you don't insist on people working for 24 hours. So I think it's time to normalize AmeriQuirks, which is the best word I've come up with. And if you can think of a better word for jank in American-made games, please let me know in the comments. What matters is that we normalize it. We need to let people know that tiny problems like this. Tiny problems like, oh, if the conversation goes down this exact sequence, things might be a little weird, or an object might disappear in the background. Stuff that, if you can fix it during normal work hours, great. If you can't, oh well, who cares? It's like not that big of a deal. Normalize AmeriQuirks. Let the world know that you don't have to perfectly polish every game. As a matter of fact, if you're already into a lot of Eurojank games, if you're already into a lot of really low-budget indie games, you already know that a game does not need to be perfectly polished to be basically perfect anyway. And that's what Psychonauts 2 is for me. It has these elements of Amerijank. Amerijank. Let's just stick with Amerijank. Who cares? Amerijank. It has these elements of jank. It has this really bizarre economy that doesn't really make any sense to me. And they could have probably done more with it. And I'm getting a phone call. What the hell? Hello? I don't have a car, you dumb robo-bitch. Okay. Sorry about that. I only used that term because it was not a real person. I don't usually use that term on women, I swear. Anyway, normalize Amerijank.
Yes.
Do it. Let everyone know. Don't
Forget everything.
You don't have to kill every person involved in making a game just to make sure that a character's hair is perfect. Look at Mia's hair. You just saw it. It looked fine. It looked good enough. This game looks like a super high-res texture pack for a game for the original Xbox. And guess what? It looks fantastic. Because when you're creative, you can make lower fidelity textures look great. You can make lower polygon count models look great. Just, you know, you don't need to go overboard with things. I think it's about damn time that American AAA studios recognize the power of jank. Spend the money that you save on polish by instead, you know, giving your employees lunch every day. It really shouldn't be that expensive for you, really. I think the best way to sum up everything at the very end is that when Undertale first came out, Toby Fox did this very snarky thing. This very, it's, let's just face it, it's a baller move. Like, I really can't call it anything else. Where he would list quotes from reviews that were all negative. He would say, like, quote, I think it was James Stephanie Sterling now, who said that if there's one thing I have to say about this game is that Toby Fox doesn't know when to let a joke go. Or a different reviewer who said that the puzzles are not spectacular. And then immediately followed by them giving the game a perfect score. And this is what this game is for me. Yeah, the puzzles aren't spectacular. The feedback in combat isn't spectacular. The economy is really strange and kind of pointless. 10 out of 10. If you've been waiting for the sequel to Psychonauts, if you, like me, have played Shenmue 3 and it was a disaster, and have been waiting for Beyond Good and Evil 2, and now it turns out that it's being made by a team that probably, to at least 30% consists of sex pests, and now you're disillusioned about all of that, at least know that Psychonauts 2 is actually the long-awaited sequel that is everything you could have possibly wanted in terms of gameplay, in terms of visuals, in terms of music, and in terms of story. So many things make sense now. So many mysteries that I didn't know were mysteries so many characters that I did not know were as important as they ended up being. So many little plot points that you would think were just throwaway little details. Everything is back, and everything is wrapped up, to my knowledge. And the beautiful thing is that, unlike Shenmue 3, this one does not end in a to be continued. It ends in a, hey, you did it. Adventure over. There could be more in the future, though. The ending very much leaves the possibility of a Psychonauts 3. But even if there never is one, Raz's story is complete. The story that started in the first game is done. And it's just fantastic. It's excellent, and I'm about to lose my voice entirely. So I guess I better sign off then. Once again, this has been Handsum German, the only show on the internet. If you found this video informative, entertaining, or good to fall asleep to, make sure you like and subscribe, leave a comment, and read Terry Pratchett novels. It's what Tim Schafer would have wanted. And I'm just going to leave it at that. You'll figure it out. Also, this game has better writing than Wonder Woman 84. Play the game to find out why. It's on Game Pass. It's well worth it. The original Psychonauts is probably really cheap somewhere. I think you can get it for like $10 even when it's not on sale. Probably still holds up really well. I mean, I last played it, I think, 5 years ago, and it held up perfectly fine even for someone who, like, had never played it before. It's good stuff. Both of those games, fantastic. You don't need to have played the first game to understand this one, but you're going to get so much more out of it if you did. And if you have played the first one and liked it, this game is maybe, to my knowledge, the first actual AAA game to come out this year. The first game to actually meet the quality standards of what the industry likes to call AAA. It's insanely good. I love it. I adore it. It beat out Ender Lilies. So, yeah. And that game is a Metroidvania Souls-like-ish thing. It's a Metroidvania mostly. So, if a 3D platformer can trump a Metroidvania, that's a pretty good sign. Pretty good indicator for how good this game is. Now I'm done. Now I'm done for real. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.